Rhythm Rock Live, we're on location tonight in the NWA Ruthless Studios, here to talk to NWA and Eazy-E, probably the most controversial rap group in Los Angeles.
At that time, all the rappers were claiming their hometowns, South Bronx, you know, wherever they may be, New York, Queens, whatever the case may be. We were from Compton.
Coming up in the ghetto, period, builds character to me. You know what I'm saying? It definitely can build character if you use it in a positive way.
When we seen, you know, regular homies from the neighborhood that was just putting down real street raps, you know, it made us feel like we could do it.
Something really special was coming out of that neighborhood. It was a fresh, really volatile time in music. I liken it to Elvis Presley when rock and roll started, to when the Beatles came. It was something really special coming out of there.
After a while, Michael Jackson didn't work. People didn't believe the hype. We didn't care. We didn't care. If they didn't feel it, with all of that trying to be shy nonsense, people weren't checking for that no more. Rap made it gritty.
I think we're successful because we're telling it like it is, and you know, that's what people want to hear because they're sick of hearing about fairy tales and stuff like that.
NWA to me was like anti-establishment.
They was bringing, you know, South Central to the forefront and what was happening and, you know, drugs and the whole shot. I mean, they was hitting another element of a society that nobody else had touched on.
They talked about being gangsters. Gangster was a big hit. Fuck the Police was a big hit.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
When I went and got NWA albums, I bought them as a fan.
You just see an all-star cast of people, of Eazy being the mastermind, Q being the rhyme writer, Dre laying down the tracks, the producer, and then you had Ren who played a supporting cast. And that just made up one of the great groups of hip-hop.
We don't tell you what to do and we'll tell you what not to do. You got your own freedom of choice.
Eazy represented, you know, the hardcore little gangster on the corner.
Don't try to hold us back because this record has cursing on it, or it said something, or you talking about raping somebody and everything.
People were selling cocaine, making a lot of money, and he was the first person that actually came out and admitted it and boasted about it on a record.
It's bullshit.
Eazy-E turned out to have some business savvy.
Eazy was a local crack slinger, okay? He made him some money, and because I was one of the few guys he knew had a studio, he wanted to get with me and get in the studio. He was not intended to be a rapper. He was going to be a financier.
Dre was producing for Lonzo, of Crew Cut Records, and the Wrecking Crew.
Dre started getting in trouble. He was going to jail for warrants on a regular basis. I'm digging in my pocket to get him out, okay? So I got to the point where I got tired of it.
And Lonzo didn't get him out of jail. Eazy got him out of jail.
When Eric got him out of jail, they cut a deal that Dre would do some tracks for Eric in my studio.
And then they hooked up and was boys ever since then.
You put the dot on your target, then you blow the shit out the motherfucker. No joke.
Eazy knew it was like a joke to him, okay? It was like, but he got so far into it, it was like, okay, I am this. I'm walking through the Carson Mall. I look up in the HQ, which is a sporting goods store and a gun store, and these guys are buying semi-automatic weapons to go on tour with. I'm like, shit, what kind of tour you guys going on, Vietnam or what?
They were selling out the back of cars, and they were making money, and they were going to the top one way or the other.
We used to ride around in Eazy's Jeep all day and sell records to the, what they call swap meets out here.
We used to make people buy records.
How'd you make it buy it?
With a gun.
Eazy paid Lonzo to introduce him to Jerry Heller.
Jerry Heller was basically Dr. Dre and Eric Wright's manager and label head.
Ruthless started from Eazy-E. Eazy-E knew that Dre was a dope producer. He did the Straight Outta Compton album. He did Eazy Does It. He did Michelle A's album. He did the Doc's album.
Dr. Dre was one of these guys that could take this raw street sound and turn it into the kind of magic that would hit to a wide audience of kids.
They had a message that clearly was heard and felt by young people.
All over the country, they had pockets of young brothers who sold dope and had to carry 9mm pistols, who had a lot of money that could relate.
Every kid wants something that's sort of forbidden. Certainly this kind of imagery was. In fact, they couldn't even hear it on their regular radio stations.
They sold over 1 million albums. And we have to understand that with rap music, past 500,000, 600,000 albums, you go outside the black community.
You had little white kids out there that was, grew up in Pop's Country Club, and they wasn't having it. They wanted to hear NWA.
It became clear that there weren't just 10,000 kids listening to this. There was hundreds of thousands in each city.
People sat back and seen an album that sold 1 million units that was never played on radio. And I had to question myself, how does this happen? How did this happen? What went on here?
Now, when it starts making real money and it starts looking like some success is going to come about, that's when the shit starts.
Easy and Jerry wasn't paying Dr. Dre enough money.
At that time, I was owed money, but they wasn't paying it. You know what I'm saying? I think they were trying to starve me out. As hard as you work for your money, there's at least 2 or 3 people out there working just as hard to get it from you.
I was there when Dre told me he would sell his soul to the devil for $1 million. And I swear right now, devil got to have a receipt for his ass.
Suge Knight was always around. He was around in the days of NWA. I never noticed who he was.
Suge was just a big kid. He was really at that time totally nobody.
Suge Knight was a bodyguard, bodyguarding Bobby Brown. Being a bodyguard is probably one of the best music industry schools that you could go to, because you're gonna learn everything about the business.
I was out there looking and learning, and I seen the different people complain. I seen artists, I seen people trying to be artists. I see people talk about songs, and I'm just listening, I'm hearing it all.
He was an aggressive person that cleared the way for me to go in and do what I had to do, by any means necessary.
Suge was a leader. He was a winner. He was smart. He kind of reminded me of a hip-hop Dick Griffey.
In the 1980s, Solar was probably the most successful black-owned record label in America. Dick Griffey, who was the founder of the company, was one of those men who had the rare ability, I think, to identify talent in people.
What I'm interested in is really teaching young people how to be in business for themselves.
Suge first came to see Dick because he was managing a young guy named Mario Johnson, PK Chocolate, who had written a number of songs on a Vanilla Ice album.
I did all of his songs at his kitchen table at his house. Me and Quake would do tracks, and I would go to his house and write, give him songs, and he would learn them.
He had gotten some credit on the album, but they hadn't paid him. They wouldn't return his phone calls.
I couldn't get in contact with him, but the record wasn't doing anything at that time, and then when the video hit BET is when the record started taking off.
The thing happened so fast and it blew up so quick, the first thing they wanted to do is tell me, look, we'll give you a couple of dollars, they'll let bygones be bygones. I wasn't going for it.
Suge came to me at the Palm restaurant first and just sat down and said hello. He was kind of nice, It kind of scared us because he was really intimidating. He had like 6 or 7 guys with him that looked like a football team.
We already knew where he was staying because I was supposed to be hearing some tracks that he was doing. But for some reason, they wanted me to just come by myself. You know what I'm saying? And Suge was like, why they just want you to go by yourself? They already didn't try to beat you out of money. They didn't beat you out of songs. I'm going with you.
Their whole attitude probably was, look, we're just going to go in there and tell him we're going to do it like this and give him a check, and he going to shut up. I had a different program when we met.
One day I went into my hotel room and he was in there, and he's with several people, and then he let me know what he wanted, and he wanted to get some points off the record, Ice Ice Baby.
I'm like, look, you can't give me nothing. It's what I'm going to give you because you didn't get the rights to put it out there because I haven't got paid and my client haven't got paid.
I remember watching Primetime Live, the interview with Vanilla Ice.
Suge took me out on the balcony, started talking to me personally. He had me look over the edge, show me how high I was up there.
You scared?
I needed to wear a diaper on that day.
He didn't, first of all, hang me off from any balcony or any of this stuff. Okay, the story's been kind of blown out of proportion, and I want to clarify right now that Suge and I have no bad feelings or anything towards each other.
We had to sue EMI and Winkle to recover that money.
And it was more than a year in the settlement of that lawsuit that Chocolate finally got paid. Doesn't mean he didn't get hung over the balcony, but if he did, it didn't make him go pay.
You can look at it like I was an investor in Death Row Records with no return on my money.
Suge said, well, I got some other clients who also have written songs and produced records, and they haven't been paid either.
He shows up on my doorstep with these two guys called Doc and Dre. Doc was the storyteller. The DOC was the guy that came up with those great stories. He was probably the single most influential person in gangster rap.
Dre basically made Ruthless Records. I mean, you know, he did the music. He probably the one who, you know, knew how to work with the artists. And it must have been him and Eazy's company together. And then when Eazy met Jerry, Jerry came in and asked Dre out and say, you know, Eric, I'll give you a little bit more money. We just use Dre basically as a slave.
They had the worst contracts I'd ever seen in the history of the record business. The contracts that Ruthless and Jerry Heller had with NWA and Dre, I guess if I said draconian, that would be a kind word.
In the process of having a number of conversations with Doc and Dre, the question came up about how can we be assured that we're going to get paid in the future? Dick said, look, Dre, if you can make records the way you make records, I'll show you how to start a company. You won't have to worry about people paying you. You'll have a company that you own and control.
I suggested that, why don't you guys go and talk to Eazy and see if you can make a deal where Dre continues to produce Eazy. For Ruthless, he continues to produce NWA and the other acts.
I was consulting for Ruthless, for Eazy-E, working through Jerry Heller. One day, Dre came in with Shug to my office in Hollywood and simply said they had left Ruthless, were starting their own company called Row Records.
It didn't go down like we were supposed to, and so Eazy had to be persuaded to make some moves to make things happen.
According to court papers, Shug and friends basically came in and told Eric and Jerry Heller Dre was leaving and they couldn't stop them, and that this was not just legal, it was physical, it was personal. The stories that Eric E. told was that they came in with baseball bats, threatened guns.
Under threat of his life and telling him that they would kill his mother and that they were holding me hostage. Under those kinds of duress, got him to sign releases for Dr. Dre.
I wasn't there. I wasn't in the room. But when Eazy-E said in the papers that me and the chairman of Sony, Tommy Mottola, was in the room with bats and pipes, he's obviously a liar.
There's no question that we have substantial documentary evidence of a conspiracy here.
Eric Wright, Eazy-E, filed a RICO lawsuit against them. It was the first time RICO had been used in the music business. RICO is a racketeering lawsuit. It's the thing that they use to get the mafia when they can't get the mafia leaders on anything else. Eazy-E's lawsuit contended that there was money laundering, extortion, threats, and violent intimidation. Not only was it charged against Shug and Death Row for stealing what was their top producer, Dr. Dre, it was charged against Sony Music. From day one, this label was born amidst a controversy that involved violence.
The initial understanding was that Doc and Dre and Dick and Shug would be partners in this company.
Each one of the artists that started was at the beginning. I got a lot of love for, and they always will be a part of the family. On the strength that they took that chance. It's not like we had a name out there. It's not like we had a lot of money to give them. The money I gave them came out of my pocket.
Back then, Shug was like very behind the scenes and helpful and quiet, humble, non-visible. He didn't like cameras. He was invisible, the invisible man.
His role was to handle the day-to-day business, dealing with the artists, dealing with distributors and record companies and what have you. My job was to go in here and push these buttons and make the records happen.
Everybody was following Dre because people knew that Dre was the man. Like everything that he touched was like, you know, gold or platinum or better.
That's who everyone wanted to work with him. He was actually the most bankable person at that time, pretty much in the industry, from the R&B rap standpoint.
Everybody was taking direction from Dre as far as he knows what he's doing. He just finished doing NWA albums that's double and triple platinum, so you have to have confidence in what you've seen. You watched this man make money.
Warren G was my best friend and Nate Dogg was my best friend. So we formulated 213 and Warren G was the DJ. I was a rapper. Nate Dogg would sing the hooks. We didn't have drum machines back then. All we had was records and turntables and a microphone. Warren G called me on the three-way and was like, Snoop, I got Dre on the phone, cuz he liked the tape. He wanna work with us, cuz he wanna work with us. I said, nigga, stop lying. And he said, hello? I said, who this? He said, it's Dre. He said, man, that shit was dope, man. I wanna get with you. Come to the studio Monday.
At that time, it was a dream just to be in the same room with Dr. Dre, you know? Dr. Dre wants us to come to the studio where he is. I'd have jogged up there if I didn't have a car.
I wanted to appreciate the game and accept everything that was offered to me and learn and just be a student at the time.
They were housed in my building, so they didn't have a lot of expenses. You have to understand that the greatest expense in making a record is the studio time. I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the rap or hip-hop scenario, so I kind of let them do their own thing.
Some nights we used to stay up there all night and leave till like 5, 6 in the morning. I mean, it had a special vibe up there. You just wanted to be there. Even if you wasn't working on the song, you just wanted to be there because it had that atmosphere. It just was the spot to be at. It was right in the middle of Hollywood, and you know, it was just a place to be for us. And we was young, and we never really had been out of the neighborhood, and you know, we was getting a chance to see it all in bright lights. And this was the same studio that Shalimar, Lakeside, The Whispers, Babyface, The Deal, all of them recorded all their albums in the same studios.
On a business level and on a day-to-day basis was merely existing. It seemed like they were trying to find somebody to put some money into it or somebody to help them out.
Money was hard to come by back then because it wasn't no structure, it was no label. And Suge Knight did all he could do at the time as far as, you know, go in his pocket, his bank account to get us money. Dre didn't really have no money. He was leaving NWA.
Dick had made a deal with Suge, Doc, and Dre to sell him a recording studio that he owned. That was going to be something that they would own separate from the Death Row label because they wanted to have something that they owned. Suge came along and said he had found somebody to help them finance the purchase of the studio.
It's always been a subject of speculation where they got their original funding, and the FBI's continuing to look into this.
There are so many things you hear about this situation. I tell you this, Mike Harris was firmly planted in the middle of it.
Well, on the news, they used to call Mike the Godfather.
Tonight, the story of a man who tried to murder his best friend. At the same time, he was attempting to win his way into Beverly Hills acceptance.
This is Michael Harris, a man drug agents describe as a major cocaine trafficker. At the young age of 26, he had already made millions of dollars. These are his roots, the streets of South Central Los Angeles, where he started pushing dope on street corners and hung with a blood street gang called the Bounty Hunters. In the drug world, he is known as Harrio.
Mike Harris was a known entity in our community. You know, he was this guy bigger than life because Mike Harris was in jail doing things.
Prior to his incarceration, he was very visible. He had started doing numerous things in the community.
Harris built an organization that distributed cocaine in California, Arizona, Texas, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, Louisiana, Florida, and New York. Investigators say he dealt so much cocaine, major Colombian drug kingpins like Mario Villabona were obliged to deal directly with Harris. But like a mob godfather, Harris sought to legitimize his illicit fortune and gain Beverly Hills respectability.
I was not a drug dealer. I was a person who decided to sell drugs. But I also, at another point, decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. So I took those proceeds and invested in various real estate and businesses that turned out to be quite profitable.
Mike Harris had a wonderful background in entertainment. I think he was the first African-American ever to produce a Broadway show that was a smash, and it gave Denzel Washington his start.
Checkmate was the name of the play. The play opened on Broadway. Many of us African-Americans have been on Broadway, on the screen, out front, singing and dancing. but very few of us have been there as producers.
I thought he was an entrepreneur in New York. I had no idea that he was in jail.
The first time I met Michael, it was a drug case involving Bo Bennett, Mario Villabona. That trial went and resulted in a number of convictions that went to trial in a federal court. And after that case, Michael, I believe, contacted David Kenner to have him represent him on his appeal.
David Kenner was a longtime Los Angeles criminal attorney. By the late 80s, he had become part of a fraternity of top-flight attorneys that handled a lot of federal cases, a lot of big drug cases downtown. In the course of his legal work, he became Michael Harris's attorney. I think if you look at clients of his over time, David has a habit of getting very close to his clients and getting very involved in his clients' lives, perhaps more so than would be wise for a lawyer.
David just, fell in love with Mike when they became friends. He was a friend to us, I looked at him like family. I was out in LA by myself and he took me in, him and his family would go out to eat. We would do everything together.
He became someone who was a confidant, a friend of Michael Harris's, and also involved in business with Michael Harris.
I think that he's a lawyer who had a lot of money and he represented people who had a lot of money, and it would not be unusual to me for somebody who represented people with money to say, I want to invest.
To achieve the massive task of getting me out of prison, it took not just money but power and the proper timing. At some point, we talked about getting into the entertainment business.
Everybody wants to be in the music business. And the years that I've worked, I've gotten tapes and offers from everyone from politicians, to businessmen who want to be in the entertainment business.
A young man by the name of Eric had told me about Shug's background and that Shug was aware of my background and that he was somewhat intrigued behind my past and he had wanted to hook up with me in some form or fashion.
They started talking, Mike said, you got Dr. Dre, and Shug said, yeah, he a producer.
But once I found out that Shug was in the entertainment business, which I had been contemplating re-entering, I made the hookup and we talked on the phone a few times.
Mike said, well, we need to meet. And Shug said, well, I got a couple of cases. I can't get in to visit you. So Mike said, no, I got this attorney. He's bad. He can get you in here.
David Kenner brought Suge Knight to see Michael at Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles.
When I asked the question to Shug, what does it actually take? He told me that we could be 50-50 partners for about $1.5 million.
They set down their basic business plan that they would start a company called Godfather Entertainment, and one division of it would be Death Row Records.
What I suggested to David and Shug is that I do not include my name in the corporation and that these guys could go ahead and do the actual upfront managing and representing of the company. Kenner started off as my guy, watching my back, supposedly, and Lydia was also there to represent my percentage of GF Entertainment, which we decided would be the parent company of Death Row.
One day, I see these two people walk in a building who I'd never seen before, and one was David Kenner, and the other was Lydia Harris.
In the summer of 1991, Kenner started coming around. There was a lot of buzz about this company, a lot of expectations that it could be a successful company. And David was one of the people around at the time making a play to be Suge's partner and to take care of business for Suge, to handle business for Suge.
A couple days after Mrs. Harris and David Kenner came in, things actually changed drastically. Immediately, the studio gets carpeted, things start getting fixed. I'm starting getting presented with money to find apartments for the artists that didn't have any apartments, didn't have any money. I'm also given an allowance for them.
I saw a few little upgrades in the studio, some chairs, some speakers.
And I was also told we'll be getting collect calls and to accept him and to find Suge where he was and connect him.
We were assigned with them to build an awareness for Godfather Entertainment and to kick off their first vehicle, which is Death Row Records, to the industry.
Norman Winter, in his infinite wisdom, said, let's take the boys into Beverly Hills. Let's stick it in everybody's face. So off to Chasen's.
Let me see you put your hands together and say, oh yeah! Let me see somebody give Dre, Shug, EOC a round of applause. Death Row Records is going to be the record company of the 2000s.
We were thinking about putting in metal detectors at the entrance.
Everyone gets served with subpoenas. as an invitation.
You're hereby ordered to appear before the Honorable Dr. Dre and the officers of GF Entertainment as a guest of the court to witness the springing of Death Row Records.
Put your hands together. Come on, y'all, make some noise.
We invited virtually every major record company executive in Los Angeles and New York, and it was so big that we originally planned on spending around 20, 25,000. I think it turned out to be 35 or 50.
They had enough money at that time behind them, and they looked good. For somebody that comes out of nowhere to have a party at Chasen's on Grammy night, which is reserved generally for all the white people. It's also a place that would never be associated with rap music in any way unless it was something co-sponsored by a white group.
The market we're going after, we're mainly for the people. I mean, for us, the West Coast, there's a lot of talent around that guys really don't have the opportunity to have a chance to prove themselves. So far as GF Entertainment goes, with the studio and the films, we're giving all the youngsters opportunities from all the neighborhoods where basically we haven't forgot where we came from.
I personally interviewed all of the players that were there.
GF Entertainment is a multimedia company. We have Death Row Records, we have a movie production unit, concerts, we're going to be doing pay-per-view concerts and all kinds of exciting things.
In the beginning, they was giving Mike his props. And they was recognizing that there was another entity that helped this be one major powwow.
When it came to Dave Kenner, he toasted the man who made it all responsible, Harry O.
The label started with Dr. Dre, who was going to do his own thing, and with a lot of help from Suge Knight and Harry O and a number of people, and we got it all together.
And that's on tape, and the FBI confiscated that from me under very rude circumstances.
When Death Row was in the Solar offices, we pretty much gave over to them one floor. There were a lot of young street folks hanging out, but it wasn't what it became.
Unfortunately, there was a lot of tension. An element showed up that my people were not accustomed to. Dre had invited these guys over to the studio. When Suge came, these guys were using the phone.
There was a phone that was in the studio that was reserved for me to call on. And Suge would make it clear to everybody that phone should not be tied up. Because of my situation, it was hard for me to communicate, so the phone could not be busy.
So he told them, hey man, get off the phone. So the guy says to Suge, hey man, we were invited up here by Dre. And Dre told us that we could use this phone.
By challenging Suge about the phone and also challenging Suge about his authority, them just found themselves in an awkward position.
An argument ensued. Suge went down to the car and got a gun.
That was Suge's domain, and no one would talk back to him and no one would go against him. And for somebody to be visiting and taking a stance against him, it was like he had to clear that up.
And hey, he beat these guys up in the studio. He shot through the wall to scare them. The hole is in the wall over there. The cops came and dug the bullet out.
George and Linwood Stanley later sued Knight. He agreed on a $1 million settlement, but only paid a third of it.
Deep Cover.
Deep Cover was a critical success.
It was the introduction of Dre as a solo artist.
I'm on a mission and my mission won't stop.
It was the introduction of Dre as a mentor to other artists, in this case Snoop Doggy Dogg.
187 on an undercover car.
Yeah, and you don't stop.
Cause it's 187 on an undercover car.
Yeah, and you don't stop.
By Snoop blowing up on Deep Cover, I looked at that like we were all blowing up, because I always knew we did music together, and I always had confidence in our music that it would sell and it would sell worldwide. And after the way it blew up with Snoop, it pumped me up to like, man, I can't wait till it's my turn, because they really do love what we're doing.
That single is so significant because it shows these two different worlds that Dre was leaving and where he was going to.
Dr. Dre wanted to make a statement that he was a solo artist, that he was a good artist on his own and a good producer.
The thing back then was we gonna try to come up. That's all Dre used to talk about, is coming up, coming up. And the Chronic was what was supposed to set it off.
What I'm doing right now is
I'll be putting out a solo album soon.
Everybody put their all into the Chronic album because we seen that not only was this going to build a record company that we were on, because this was the first album off the record company we were on. This will build all of our careers.
And we vibing straight whatever Dre wants. It's Dre, whatever you want. You want this concept, Dre, you want this. It's all about Dre, it's all about Compton and Dre. Boom.
You had Snoop Dogg, who just brought a whole nother style to rap music.
He has a voice where he can rap over beats and just rip a beat to pieces.
And then a lot of that shit was on the spot, spontaneous, right there. We just putting the weed together, like just breaking it down, putting it in a zigzag. Once we twist that shit up and blaze it, if it's the Chronic, we're gonna keep it. If it's, we're gonna unroll that motherfucker and throw it out and come with some new shit.
First of all, you had so many hungry, starving individuals that, wanted to be superstars who put their talent together, and it came out to be a classic.
The camaraderie in them early days over there, man. All them cats used to show up to the studio.
They were poor as hell, but they still were a family. You still had fun.
So it wasn't like we had money to hang with our friends or anything like that, so we just hung together. And we created a masterpiece.
I think it was a lot of collaboration on the Chronic album, as far as names like Daz, Corrupt, Snoop, Warren G, DOC, RBX, and myself, Rage, Jewel.
We were all starving. All starving. Dre included. We'd be up there eating Popeye's chicken 5 days a week.
I gotta go roll up a joint. We had weed, the best weed, you know what I'm saying? That's why we made the Chronic, because we had the Chronic.
I mean, sometimes we just was in there, drinking or elevating our minds to another level. Dre would be like working with the beats at the time, and he'll come up with something, and depending on who was in the studio at that particular time.
It was people waiting all over the world for the album, for Dre's album to drop.
The Chronic was finished. We had originally thought we were going to be able to distribute the record with Sony.
This would have been the first time in history that young guys would have actually had the opportunity to have a distribution deal, what they call a P&D deal, through a major and get all of the money.
Sony refused to distribute the Chronic.
Sony, because of their fearfulness of some of the crazy things going on around Death Row and their wariness of the contractual status of Dr. Dre, didn't want to get that deal done.
Because of Eazy-E's persistence, he had been wronged and he had been robbed for his artists. Sony chose not to be a part of the lawsuits.
Part of their fears in dealing with rap bands is that some of these gangster rappers might turn out to be real gangsters. Indeed, many of them are. There's any number of these guys go to jail every year. I mean, it's like first thing that, they go platinum, then go to jail.
Dick and I then negotiated a deal with BMG to put out the record. They heard the lyrics and they said, we're not going to put the record out. Everybody got afraid of putting out any kind of rap records with explicit lyrics that talked about killing cops and stuff.
It wasn't nobody out there with us. I mean, it was a time when we were shopping the deal. We had an album done.
John McClain Jr. came along. When he heard the record, he went crazy. He said, Griff, you gotta give me this. You gotta give me this record.
John said, I love the record. Why don't you let me take it to Interscope?
An opportunity appeared for a young, aggressive label to distribute Death Row. They had two established industry people to deal with, Jimmy Iovine, who's a superstar producer of Rock Records, and Ted Fields, who had been a movie producer and produced some hit music. They had some rather controversial acts of their own in rock, 9 Inch Nails. They signed Tupac Shakur, the other hottest rapper in the business.
Interscope was out of business. They were getting ready to close the doors. Warner's, Atlantic was dropping the deal, and Ted Fields was tired of pouring his personal money in there. So here comes Dick Griffey with the Chronic.
Dick and I went and met with Jimmy Iovine, and we met with David Cohn, and we played them the Chronic, and they said they were interested in making a deal.
So these guys told me, said, look, Dick, we're going to advance you $200,000.
Well, in the meantime, what was going on is there was no more money. There was no cash flow.
Friday, no money. Saturday, no money. Sunday, no money. Monday, no money. Tuesday, they advanced $100,000, for which we had to sign as a loan. By Wednesday, Suge and Dre are up at Interscope. Jimmy Iovine got a hold of Dre, said, see, Dre, they doing it to you again, Dre. These guys are taking advantage of you.
They then got in touch directly with Suge and said, Griffey was here, he won't make us a deal, but if you bring us a record, we'll give you $1 million.
The man, once again, had done the old divide and conquer.
It's real a lot of prejudice in the business, and people think it's so much black and white, but a lot of it is young and old.
Most of our young people don't really know what's available for them out there, so that's how they get taken advantage of.
Older guys, only thing they want to do is sit you down and say, look, okay, Suge, you say you're a young entrepreneur, this is what we're going to do. Give me all the stuff you got. Give me your tapes, give me your masters, give me your groups. Now I'm going to go over there and make you a deal.
Suge didn't know contracts. He didn't know manufacturing. He didn't know publishing.
But my opinion was, look, I ain't no punk. You don't got to talk for us. We're going to go in there to speak for ourselves. Instead of getting $1, we want $5. And our masters, and our ownership.
What they ended up with is going over to Interscope and getting one of those regular slave deals. They took the kids away from the nest too soon.
Interscope clearly saw the money. And this is the record business. And I think they were smart enough to see that whoever this guy, Suge Knight, was, and knowing the track record of this producer, Dr. Dre, and you had the legal mind of Dave Kenner there, they've got all tools in place. Everything that we need is right here. We don't really have to do anything. All we have to do is fund these guys and do what we do, which is promote records, market records, and advertise records.
Jimmy Iovine had to go pay off Ruthless, Eazy, Jerry Heller, and have the Chronic distributed through Priority Records.
Eazy was getting on Dre's Chronic record like 50 cents a copy and maybe 25 cents, meaning, Dre Day, he talking shit about me. But every time Dre Day sell a record, I get 25 cents a copy.
After they signed the agreement, I think they realized that they needed to leave, and they did. All of a sudden, they disappeared.
Suge cut off all ties with, the people he was dealing with in the beginning, and we got a whole new office and a whole new crew.
And that really became kind of the rupture of the relationship between Dick and Suge and Doc and Dre.
The Chronic goes out and sells 5 million copies, generates $50 million that saved Interscope, made Interscope.
We invented something that wasn't out there. So it was fresh and everybody wanted it, from the East Coast to the West Coast, period.
You couldn't turn on MTV without seeing Dr. Dre.
First time I performed songs for the Chronic was with Dr. Dre. And we did like a small little concert in Compton. And man, motherfuckers was singing every word of the songs. And it made me feel like, damn, this is my life right here.
To me, it wasn't like, okay, Dre is advocating everybody smoke weed. He wasn't saying that. He was saying my album is dope. Do you understand what I'm saying? My album is dope. Buy it.
It was a good record. I know a lot of cats that's pissed off behind those records right now because they say they haven't been paid or didn't get credit for it. I liked it. I mean, I was surprised by it. I was happy with it. In fact, I still play it from time to time. I don't like listening to his voice on this shit, but I still listen to it.
If you understand, what was going on in the street at that time and even now, word of mouth is everything, and Death Row became really hip on the street. Every young black entertainer wanted to be a part of it, so there was no problem finding talent at all. There was an understanding at Death Row that they weren't getting at the major companies.
One of the things about these major labels, they'll never understand street music. They'll never understand stuff that starts right there in the neighborhoods. They'll never understand it, never will, never will, never will. That's why you'll always have some young entrepreneurs who will come along, who will really understand how to do that and make a killing.
I'm not Hollywood. If you see me out somewhere, I don't care who you is. I'm gonna come over there, give you a hug, talk to you, how you doing, whatever. You ain't gonna speak to me, I ain't gonna do no, let's do lunch, I ain't with all that. I be like, what's up? I'm still from the ghetto.
It was a very, very good time for young kids looking for a break. There was an opportunity there. There were people there that understood them, understood what they were about. Kids would come in and want to audition right off the street.
Basically did the same thing Motown did. They took the mindset, the spirit, the dreams, the hopes, and wishes, and thoughts of the people of a time period, and they set it to music.
If anybody would really stop for a moment to analyze what really happened at Death Row, it's really a miracle. You have a company, a small company, run by a young black entrepreneur, and he releases 5 or 6 LPs, and all of them went at least, I think, double platinum. Now, it's a known fact in our industry, if you're working for a major and you release 10 LPs and you have 3 to 4 hit records out of the 10 that you release, you're considered a genius.
I think the most important thing in my situation that I wasn't coached. I think if a person is coached about the business, they're going to continue to make the same mistakes that other entrepreneurs been making all along.
The appeal of Death Row Records and everybody wanting to join Death Row Records at the time was the fact that Suge Knight was a black man with a lot of power, and he was a fearsome individual. That's the type of person you want on your team.
Suge Knight is an intimidating individual. When he enters a room, you notice him. You can't help it. I think that he would be considered a handsome man, huge man.
Suge's tremendous size intimidated people. When you got a 300-pound guy saying something, it means a lot more than if you have Mickey Rooney saying it. Suge was bright enough to use his size much like Don King uses his hair.
The hype got so big that everybody started fearing.
I have friends who are at Sony, and one of them called and said, gee, you know, we really want to get a track. Will you do me a favor? Could you go talk to Suge? And I said, yeah, I'll go talk to him. And so I went over to see Suge, and I said, Suge, what is it you're doing? You got people out here that are afraid to talk to you.
Suge became somewhat like a folk hero after a while. These stories just develop a life of their own. You got Suge doing everything from throwing people off of a 30-story building to, you know, putting rocks and burying them in cement.
The media, they put bad names on people and, you know, try to drag their name through the dirt or whatever, but now, as an individual, you got to do what you got to do to get paid.
He was a very brilliant businessman. Whatever his tactics might have been, whoever he had to step on to get there, his main objective was to just get there at any cost.
There's a genius, which is a part of him, and you know what they say about geniuses. You know, they aren't far from being insane.
Suge Knight pretty much blew his cover by appearing on the cover of magazines, because now you're no longer a figure behind the scenes. Now you're a celebrity. You're making yourself a celebrity.
Originally, I told him that he should never put himself on front of magazines. Always stay in the cut, always stay in the background. That's how you have more power. But as the social thing started to grow and people started to recognize him as being the guy, he lost or forgot that teaching.
When Snoop's album comes out, this is the most anticipated rap album in history.
Doggy Style was, we through with the Chronic, it's all about you, Snoop. You the hottest thing coming out the West Coast in a long time, and Dre gonna produce it. And when Dre produce an album from top to bottom, you can't lose.
Tell us what we should expect on the new album.
Gangsta shit, you know what I'm saying? Smooth gangsta shit.
We're here at Tower Records in Marina del Rey, where this is really the hottest album on the shelves right now.
Since the album was released at midnight last night, at this store they've already sold 130 CDs and about 100 cassettes. It could be the hottest album ever. Get it before it's gone.
Nobody had ever in the modern era had their very first album go #1. A triple platinum album is $30 million to the record label. It's more like $45 million on the retail level. Death Row became the core of Interscope, which became the core of Warner Brothers' music money-making machine.
After the Snoop album came out, it was all gravy. Because, man, Death Row was flying high then. It was just so much money floating around Death Row for anything. I remember I used to keep thousands. I used to run through thousands of dollars a day.
They're making $100 million a year. They can buy anything they want. They can buy anybody they want. That made it all very, very serious business.
Rappers didn't give gangster rap its name. The music industry gave gangster rap its name. They said this music has cussing in it, they're calling women bitches, so That's gangster rap because it comes from the gangs and the gangsters.
Gangster rap isn't something that was just born and invented in the quote-unquote ghetto. It's something that you see on American movies.
Good, I'll wag it good and ready.
The glorification of Al Capone and Lucky Luciano. That's kind of glamorous in any American's eyes, I think.
My life and people like myself in the early 80s created the atmosphere for gangster rap to have a life.
It really puts the truth of society out in front of America. And America, not used to that, is obviously going to be shocked about it.
The essence of the whole genre is the fact that it is our CNN, it is our 60 Minutes, it's our Dateline. Most artists try to be as factual as possible in depicting the actual experiences of our community.
Suppose they just started rapping about the 6 o'clock news. Would it be gangster rap?
Gangster rap is like the movies, too. Drama sells.
I take it for what it is. It's a record, it's a CD, it's a tape, you know, and I'm not gonna live my life by it. And other people shouldn't either. It's entertainment.
No black man should get on the front of a magazine with a 12-inch cigar in front of 2 Rolls Royces when what could be considered gang colors in America. That sends a bad message. That's negative.
Publicity, when it was negative, played a role also because it was part of this role that Suge Knight had chosen for the company. I mean, these kids were not gangsters, quote, real gangsters. Many people there were not, as a matter of fact, gang members like it has been portrayed in the press. You know, there were people around that were.
When you got brothers that, you know, perpetrating gang violence or gang affiliation and they making it cool, that's a problem. That could be a problem.
It wasn't just Death Row perpetuating the violence. I think it was the media. I mean, let's face it, the coverage was just awesome. All of a sudden, Death Row and gangster rap was the reason that every youngster in America was going bad.
They were attracted to the rebelliousness. They could listen to the music and experience what we were going through without having to go through it themselves.
No gangster rap!
Lyrics that promote rape, murder, racism, drug abuse, and violence.
Die. Die. Die, pig, die.
Time Warner's music division promotes music that celebrates the rape, torture, and murder of women.
C. Dolores Tucker is a political activist that embodies herself in matters of African-American decency questions.
In the beginning, she was trying to protect America from the threat of gangster rap.
You will see words that you can't even repeat in a locker room.
But by that point, the cat was out of the bag, and there's very little that she could have done.
Doggy style. Do it from the back.
She was used as a tool because she was a black woman who could make a statement and come out and say this is wrong.
She involved herself in Time Warner politics, along with a odd political bedfellow for her, who was William Bennett.
The moral obtuseness of Time Warner. We do not understand why they don't get it.
These are right-wing conservatives, both of them. They are would-be censors. Both were attacking Time Warner, along with Dole.
A line has been crossed, not just of taste, but of human dignity and decency.
Now you've got a presidential candidate accusing Time Warner of debasing the nation for handling Death Row product.
The mainstreaming of deviancy must come to an end.
And I think we do have problems with the social fabric of this country right now. I do have trouble believing that it is caused by song lyrics or movies.
Time Warner was also doing Ice-T. They got T off the label, but they were stuck with Death Row, and the numbers were so huge they didn't know what to do with it. They just put $120 million into it. They're getting all that money out and then some. They can't be seen by any of their artists to give in to political pressure whatsoever. If you do that, they'd never get another act again, and no self-respecting manager would ever sign with a label who they thought could be pressured for content.
We, African-American women particularly, are tired of being called hoes, bitches, and sluts by our children who are paid to do this by Time Warner.
She came up with an idea that she reportedly pitched to Fuchs that what if she started a label, a positive rap label, and got Suge to distribute Death Row product through her, with her as the watchdog of the lyrical content, to make sure that the messages were positive. Michael Fuchs, reportedly desperate to try and figure out a solution to this, apparently listened to her. She got Fuchs to guarantee $80 million if she could pull this off.
She was trying to solidify a position with Warner Brothers by changing the nature of gangster rap and making it more like pop rap or children's rap, which is somewhat impossible.
Interscope was not about to let Death Row go without a fight. Suge Knight also protected those artists lyrically, made sure that everyone was allowed to say whatever the hell they wanted to say.
Whatever happens, we're gonna stand up tall and be more successful. The only thing anybody doing is making us stronger and better.
No way he was gonna let C. Dolores Tucker decide the lyrical content of a Snoop Doggy Dogg album. That wasn't gonna happen. But they apparently thought it was. Michael Fuchs reportedly flew to Los Angeles in the Time Warner jet to Dionne Warwick's house, where C. Dolores Tucker's sitting there waiting for Suge Knight to come over to cut a deal that would make it tame Death Row Records.
What she really wanted was a record company, or to have more involvement in that business. I mean, it is a very lucrative business. She had the wherewithal to see where this rap situation was going, how it had the nation really sort of unnerved. She was just trying to parlay it into something for herself, or she had been promised that it would be something for herself.
Never have I discussed $80 million with them about any kind of business deal.
The story goes that they waited 5 hours, Michael Fuchs, C. Dolores Tucker, and at Dionne Warwick's house, that Suge never showed up. Suge went right back to Interscope and said, do you know what these guys just tried to pull? So Interscope then promptly sued Time Warner and promptly sued C. Dolores Tucker for interfering with their contractual relationship.
Time Warner has decided to get out of the gangster rap business by selling its 50% share of Interscope Records back to that company.
Made the right decision, the morally responsible decision, we think, and we believe that by their action, divesting themselves of Interscope at some financial loss, they have set a standard for the entire entertainment industry.
I commend them for it. I think they are going to be a good corporate citizens.
Death Row Records was at the center of controversies, and if the Republicans had had their way, would have brought down a president. That's how big the controversy got.
The origins of Death Row, starting with David Kenner, Michael Harris, and Suge Knight, didn't seem out of the ordinary until all the information started unfolding. Because David Kenner, nobody knew who he was.
David Kenner became the principal business attorney for the label, as well as the criminal attorney for many people at the label.
Los Angeles police announced that 21-year-old Calvin Broadus, better known as rap star Snoop Doggy Dogg, had turned himself into police on Friday, along with 2 other young black men, all accompanied by an attorney, in connection with the murder on August 25th of a man named Philip Waldemariam, in what police believe was a gang-related shooting.
It never should have gone to trial. The alleged victim in this case had a gun, was reaching to his waistband to pull that gun out at the time Snoop's bodyguard fired a shot. And that's what we said from the beginning. The testimony makes it clear this is a case of self-defense.
The DA, he was a pain in the ass. He just tried to do everything in the world to make me seem like the most negative, gang-banging, criminal-minded motherfucker he could just imagine, and tried to paint a picture of me that just wasn't happening. It was crazy knowing that that's what his job was to do, was to get me locked up for life. You know what I'm saying? I just want to say, fuck you, bitch.
Dave Kenner was the guy who legally made Suge secure.
Suge had 5 or 6 pending cases, which David Kenner was able to control and get rid of.
One of the benefits Suge Knight gave to people that joined Death Row was to say that I have a legal team, people who have a lot of experience in the criminal arena that can help you. Whereas in the past, coming from a black community, you go into a white justice system where all the cards are stacked against you. Here, for the first time in most of their lives, they were given a lawyer who was very capable and an investigator on top of it. And the results spoke for themselves most of the time. They got to see instances where they were acquitted and cases which normally they would have been convicted. In the rap industry, the problems happen at 1 or 2 in the morning. So it's not a 9-to-5 job. David was the rare lawyer who would be available to clients at that hour.
Of the $70 or $80 million that Interscope paid them between 1995 and 1997, about $13 million of that went to the law offices of David Kenner or to David Kenner. Certainly, this company was his bread and butter for some time.
What's your name again?
David Kenner, K-E-N-N-E-R.
Interscope would have not been able to deal with the death row problems if it wasn't for Kenner. Kenner was the mediator. He would go to them and tell Jimmy how much money he needs to fix this situation and let him handle it his way.
I was quite surprised because you would expect a music business attorney, but he wasn't. He was a criminal attorney.
He had entertainment attorney qualities. You know, he's flamboyant and he's sharp and he's kind of mafia-ish, his whole persona.
After a while, David might have got so caught up in his lifestyle that he might have become somewhat confused, because the thing is David really was supposed to be working on getting Mike out.
David was handling Michael's appeal. David was involved very much in Lydia's life, was friends with Lydia. This was a person who was very trustworthy to him.
The business became more dominant and the legal situation got put on the back burner.
When I thought, man, Mike is making a ton of money. And then you see Dave Kenner there, so you say if Dave is there, then Mike is there. And then the stories start flashing. And then you know that there's a war going on.
It was rumors that, Suge was over there trying to get a deal at Interscope, but when he would go down and visit Mike, him and Kenner would say it wasn't true, but Mike say, hey, what's this in the newspaper? And Suge would say, oh, you know how the newspaper print up articles. So Mike said, well, they're not going to just print up anything. So he started asking David, what's going on? Then David came and said, Suge did this behind my back.
And that started to cause Michael concern about what exactly was going on. He started to get word that Suge was telling people, oh, Michael Harris is nobody, he's not my partner. And the word on the street was, Michael Harris is really pissed off with Suge, it's on.
He wanted to get all the credit, which Mike don't trip the credit. The world thinks that Suge did this on his own.
Once Suge got a taste of the spotlight, he wanted it, and he wanted it by himself. If Suge didn't want to be my partner, I didn't have a problem with that. But at least compensate me for my time and the money that I invested.
Mike's in jail, but he's got a wife, he's got a kid, he's got family out here. He's got people he's taking care of. So, his reaction is he's stunned. Then he's kind of mad about it. How you gonna punk me?
The phone was never blocked because we always had cats calling from the pen. Harry O wasn't the only one. But after a while, I even remember, and I think it was because of Harry, that they then blocked the phone where it couldn't take no more calls.
David Kenner started off to play these guys against each other. Once the rift between Suge and Mike happened, Dave Kenner had to pledge allegiance one way or the other.
Throughout this time, even if Suge was denying his partnership with Michael, denying that Michael had any role in the company, David would be going up to visit Michael and saying, oh no, everything's okay, there's no problem, everything's fine, we're gonna get this taken care of.
It reminds me of the Brutus and Caesar.
At some point, Michael gets a hold of the incorporation paperwork of Death Row Records, realizes that Suge and David Kenner had set up a different company of Death Row Records that was independent of this GF Entertainment Michael had a hand in. And I think Michael began to suspect that things were not so kosher with their partnership.
They had both crossed me, the person that brought them together.
He the one told Dave, hey, look at this, man, that guy Suge. I like him. Go talk to him. Okay, a record comes, okay, I give you this amount of money. You tell him to do this. Okay, then him and Suge talking. Suge going to visit him. Suge, check this out. Put it down like this, man. Put it down like that. David, you do this part. Keep him out of jail. You make sure you keep him out of jail. That's how Suge got all them probation and stuff. Dave fighting like he crazy. Keep him out of jail because Mike telling him to. Keep him out of jail. But guess what? Soon the money come in. Who? Harry-O. They turn to Scooby-Doo on it. Who's that?
Mike said, well, where's the money at? And they said, it's going to be 60 to 90 days, before we see a royalty check. So those 60 and 90 days turn into a year.
I would send my representative to the office at Interscope to make arrangements to collect.
I went over and met with David Korn. He said, well, what if we don't pay you? And I told him, I'm not threatening you, but I'm going to go on national TV and tell what really happened.
Everybody knew Harry O wasn't no joke, okay? And everybody knew Harry O had chips. All you got to do is be no joke and have chips, and you can get somebody handled.
That's when Michael typed up a letter.
Michael put his concerns on paper in the form of a lawsuit that could have been filed, that was never filed, laying out his grievances as to how he had been a founding partner in Death Row Records and had been denied his fair share of the proceeds. That lawsuit was shown to Interscope, and Interscope paid a fairly generous settlement to make it go away before it ever got filed.
The last meeting I think I had face-to-face with Kenner was when I was going to sue Interscope. He felt that I was right in what I was doing, but the time was wrong.
That next day, I got a call. They told me that Mike was in like a wheelchair. His mouth was twisted. I mean, he couldn't even walk. He couldn't even use his hands. He couldn't do nothing. I said, what happened? And that's when the doctor said he had Guillain-Barré. And I asked Mike, I said, well, did, Kenner give you anything?
David is as smooth as you want to be and as vicious as you want to be, given the scenario.
I started thinking, at least to myself, that Suge was getting himself caught up into too many situations that were unhealthy.
He had created an image that was working for him, and sometimes the image merged with reality, and I'm not sure that as time went on that Suge didn't draw the line between when there was the image and when there was the reality.
Suge wasn't a gangster. Suge came from a family. His mother and father are still together. He was a college football player.
I feel I got a whole lot of street credibility and street smarts. And at the same time, I graduated from college. I hit the books, and I put both of them together.
The problem with individuals who come from the street who are not truly entrenched in that world, they don't understand the rules, and they think that money puts them in a situation where they can control the rules and change the rules.
He ran that company like it was his gang. That's his family. He might not love us, but he made us think he did.
A lot of what followed, in part, had to do with trying to establish Death Row as a label with the most street credibility, and we're really doing gangster rap, and we're keeping it real, and we're keeping it legitimate. And so when you guys get out the joint, you can come get a job with me, that sort of thing.
I ain't never had a job before in my life until I started working for Suge. In and out of jail, you know what I'm saying? Did a little bit of everything, you know what I'm saying? Now you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, a lot of them cats that was up there was fresh out of the penitentiary with that penitentiary mentality. It was like working at a prison with no guns, no knives, no nothing. You just had to be in there on your own and handle it. How many companies do you know can have some Crips and Bloods up there? Crips and Bloods.
I don't think that was a good idea. When Suge started to participate in the gang activity, I was very adamant with him about that, and I told him that would be his demise.
At first, I was totally with Death Row's concept, because it was about time we had a brother out there, man, that wasn't taking no shit from these companies, that wasn't paying brothers their money. So I was totally with it. It was when the nonsense got too out of hand.
We had a system of that kind of thing, sort of like a demerit system for artists and so on, and for some of the office workers.
Say something wrong, you get smacked. If you come late, you get smacked. If you do this, you get smacked. That sounds to me, it was like pimps and hoes.
I just knew how, after a while, Suge was unapproachable. You couldn't really talk to him no more. I just knew it. You was no more talking to this guy, man. This guy is the fucking man. That company was by no ways, forms, or fashion Hollywood. You know how white folks like to do. They like to scream at each other. I'm gonna get my lawyer on you. But the new brothers wasn't doing it like that. They was coming through doors, coming through windows, and the whole nine on people.
These rappers are from the street. They're not used to nothing else. So you have to deal with them in the street mentality.
I heard somebody once describe them as all thinking they were in a Godfather movie.
Suge was famous for applying the old mafia tactics. And you instill fear in everybody. When a guy just walks in, he has no idea we're in the middle of a meeting. He wants a record deal. He walks in and he says he know how to rap. So Suge says, okay, rap. If we don't like what you do, we're gonna kick your ass. He said maybe 3 words and they just lit his ass up.
I've seen people get beat up. You understand? I've seen people get that door locked on them. The infamous door locking. Well, they take you in a room and touch you up and down.
I wasn't the only lady that got beat up. But I was the only lady beat up and he held down. Shug grabbed me by my feet and everything went haywire. This girl cold cocked me. She loosened up my teeth and I had 2 black eyes. David Kenner stood up and watched. Somebody else videotaped it. And I kicked Shug in his nuts and I got the hell up out of there. I have not laid eyes on Shug since that day. He won't lay eyes on me till he see this.
He took a lot of joy in it. It was funny to him. It made him feel good to have that kind of power or to instill that type of fear.
All that drama that people knew that was happening right there at Death Row, on that 12th floor. This is at the building right down here at the UCLA on Wilshire. It never leaked over to the Interscope side. You know, you see the Interscope. Interscope looks nice, woody things, say Interscope Records, and they get in the reception. Death Row is just a door. It was just a mahogany door, colored door, with a camera.
Doc and RBX both had problems with Suge. They seen what type of person he was on the inside. Not to say nothing bad or not to say nothing good about him, but they seen the type of person he was. And through the grace of God and good attorneys, they were able to leave. Everybody else was forced in a chokehold after that.
Tupac Shakur was not before his time, but one of a kind of his time and era.
He was a movie star, and for him to be doing street stuff gave him like sort of a Marlon Brando edge. The outlaw who was living life in some romantic Ernest Hemingway world where you lived out your art.
He had that almost uncontrollable, defiant attitude.
I got a big mouth, can't help it. I talk from my heart, I'm real, you know what I'm saying? Whatever comes, comes. But my controversy probably. And it's not my fault. I'm trying to find my way in the world, you know, I'm trying to be somebody instead of just make money off everybody.
Tupac's gift was the ability to take somebody else's pain and story and translate it.
We, as rappers, bought that violence. We bought the violence that we seen on the street, we put in our records for years. And after 3-4 years, people finally starting to see it because of all the statistics that's going on in the streets. If we stop talking about it, then they wouldn't take statistics. And when they stop taking statistics, then we'd be killing each other in the street and these white people wouldn't care no more.
He would definitely give you something to think about.
I know some of y'all white folks and some of y'all black folks don't appreciate what we're talking about, but this is the only way we got to make money. And if you don't let me make my money on the streets, I guarantee you I will make my money on the streets.
A lot of people say the same things or have said the same things as Pac, but Tupac made it believable.
Because at first I always thought he was just a crazy, arrogant little idiot. But I didn't really know how deep he was.
We have to be honest about the tools that we use to survive. And why is a black life any more recoupable than a white life? You know what I'm saying? We know that they don't put the same security in the ghetto that they do in the whites in the white neighborhoods.
What I saw in Tupac was someone who had a desire to be successful, and he only had 2 or 3 avenues. One was rapping, one was acting, and the other was going into the movement that his family came out of.
His mother was a Black Panther. All of the anger, frustration, and everything that she was dealing with and what was going on with her at that time in her life was feeding right into him. When Tupac was a kid, for punishment, she would make him read the New York Times cover to cover. And at the end of the day, he would be quizzed on everything he read out of the paper. Tupac, well aware of what his mother had gone through, brought that into the 90s because nothing had changed in the 60s to the 90s as far as he saw with his race of people.
I don't know how to be responsible for what every black male did. I don't know. Yes, I am gonna say that I'm a thug. That's because I came from the gutter and I'm still here. I'm not saying I'm a thug because I want to rob you and rape people and things. I'm a businessman. I mean, you know I'm a businessman because you find me at my places of business.
Tupac was a star in Interscope. And Interscope had their hands full with him. He was in jail and in trouble.
He just got beat up by the police. He had a lawsuit going to them that he won, and he was getting just harassed for anything. I mean, you know, they just start throwing him on the news as the bad guy rap when he really wasn't that person.
I appreciate the present you've given me for giving me a fair trial and a fair shot at justice. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for just destroying everything I worked for the past 22 years, and a happy new year to you too.
Tupac was in the news every day. I mean, you can't buy that kind of publicity. It's unfortunate the kinds of media coverage that they got, but it added to sales.
People that know Pac had like 15 cases in different states in America. We would go do a show, Pac would go straight to court as soon as we get off the airplane.
Block my way and don't hit my lawyer.
Great artists are almost always out of step with what's going on in society because they see the world differently and they act differently.
The last situation he got into, Interscope kind of like left him for dead. They wasn't really fucking with Pac like that.
Shakur and another man were accused of sexually assaulting and sodomizing a 21-year-old woman in their hotel room last year.
It's not a crime for me to be with any girl I want to be with. It's a crime for that girl to turn that into a rape charge. It was her who sodomized me. It wasn't me who went down in the dance club and ate her out. It was her in the dance club who had oral sex with me. She should be charged, not me.
Last night, just after midnight, at 723 7th Avenue, that's between 48th and 49th Street, our rap star, Tupac Shakur, and 3 members of his group were robbed and shot.
The word on the streets is that it was a warning to Tupac. Who was it coming from?
In a bizarre twist of events, rap singer Tupac Shakur checked himself out of Bellevue Hospital late Wednesday night after the 23-year-old was shot 5 times early that same morning inside the lobby of a Times Square recording studio.
Shakur had appeared in court today but had little to say about being shot.
Mr. Shakur, how are you this morning?
After 3 days of deliberations, the jury has finally decided the fate of rapper Tupac Shakur. Guilty on 3 counts of sexual abuse, he now faces 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison.
The main impetus for the incarceration of Mr. Shakur was from City Hall. Mr. Giuliani himself.
Being 23, being black, and last name being Shakur in America, he never had a chance.
Tupac was in jail, and he wanted out of jail, and he wanted out of jail badly. No one, including Interscope, was putting up any bail money to get him out. And his bill was set at $1.4 million.
A lot of people on the East Coast, a lot of people in New York City dissed him hard, man. They dissed him on the radio. No one went to go visit him except for a few people.
And he wanted to be #1 again. So where else do you go but to where the other #1 people are?
Death Row Records had been trying to get Tupac for some time.
If you got Suge Knight dangling in front of you, you know, freedom, money, power, respect, I can get you out of jail. Obviously you're gonna go for it. You got a scared young man, first time behind bars. He's supposed to be back there for 4 years.
Pac promised him in return, you get me out of here, I'll put Death Row on the map. My first CD will sell 6 million copies.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that Suge wanted him on Death Row Records so badly, because even though Snoop was a huge star, he didn't have what Tupac had, that kind of icon presence like a James Dean or Elvis.
Now, I heard that he had Pac sign a contract on toilet paper. I don't know how true it is, but I know when Pac came back, he was ready.
Tupac got out in September of '95. He went to Death Row Records this day he got off the plane, and they laid down their first track for All Eyes on Me in 15 minutes.
This album is more celebratory of life, upbeat, energetic, fun, I think. But it's also harsher in terms of the language because I've been in jail for 11.5 months.
Tupac brought the feeling of I was nothing, now I'm something, and I want everybody else to be something too. If I could do it, you can do it.
He stirred up the whole group there. He got them all going and all working. He made sure that every artist at Death Row had some part of this double CD. It was his way of saying, look, I'm part of the family and I want you on my album, which he did not have to do.
Like, I remember doing a session with him, you know, and it seemed like he was just running around having fun, just partying, you know, having a good time. But the man was done. We thought that he didn't even write them. We thought he came with his lyrics already, but no, he wrote them that day. And that's just how sharp he was, man.
You had people around the studio saying, man, We gotta get like Pac. Pac just go in there, kick him in, kick him out, kick him in, kick him out. And that's all they talk about. And that's exactly what they're doing.
He made the level of competition, which is a good thing. He brought that level up. Any of the artists will tell you that what Tupac put into them was this business of the work ethic, where you can do more if you just work at it.
When Tupac came, it's like Suge wasn't worried about nobody else, not Snoop, nobody at the time. Nobody.
He didn't care nothing about any of the other artists at that time. He says all he needs is Tupac. He says Tupac is such a genius. And this guy is a workaholic. He didn't want no girls. He didn't want nothing. All he wanted was to go to the studio and go to work. He wanted to take his experiences and share it with the world.
Around the time that Tupac got out of jail, Sean Puffy Combs was about to become, I would say, the East Coast version of Suge Knight with Bad Boy Records. You know, his first big artist was the Notorious B.I.G.
This bullshit about the East Coast and the West Coast started when we went out to New York to do the Source Awards. And Mr. Knight went on stage, and he's in New York City, and we all know Puffy's from New York City.
Any artists out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
I mean, the whole crowd started booing, and then I thought to myself, like, why would you do that?
The East Coast don't love Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row. Y'all don't love us. Y'all don't love us. Well, let it be known then. We know y'all East Coast. We know we at East Coast and out. I'm the executive producer that a comment was made about a little bit earlier. But check this out. Contrary to what other people may feel, I would like to say that I'm very proud of Dr. Dre, of Death Row, and Suge Knight for their accomplishments. And all this East and West that needs to stop.
It was so personal. Puffy was a good friend of mine.
There's enough room in this business for two young black males who are entrepreneurs to exist. I mean, can you imagine if Al Bell and Berry Gordy were fighting, or if the Temptations had beef with the Four Tops? I mean, it sounds fucking retarded when you think about it. Yo, the Four Tops got beef with the Temptations. Marvin Gaye and Smokey Robinson were fighting at the Grammy Awards last night. I mean, think about that for a second.
A lot of people on the West Coast felt that we have always had love for the East Coast, you know. They can come here and break their records. They come here and play at the clubs. You know, they come do in-stores. We do the whole nine with them East Coast cats. And we go out there and we don't get that same love.
I remember New York DJs at parties refusing to play West Coast records. They country, they're Bamas, they wear jerry curls, they can't rhyme, they're whack, it's not danceable.
It was the media that blew it up, you know. You're seeing certain things that somebody said highlighted in magazines about the West Coast and vice versa, and it just boiled over from there.
All these people talking about an East Coast, West Coast war, they like the Judas was to Jesus. They only here to cause confusion.
It made rap music look bad. It made rap music look like it's just another part of the dope game.
Controversy is what Death Row started living off of instead of talent.
If this was chess, we'd be yelling checkmate 3 motherfucking years ago, because we've been beat these motherfuckers.
Then the disrespect just started getting worse and worse between the West Coast and the East Coast.
Overthrow the government y'all got right now, which is Bad Boy and Nas and all that bullshit, and we will bring a new government here that will feed every person in New York.
And then you had the Tupac and Big situation, you know, flaming it even more.
I possess his soul, his and Puffy. They know that I was the truest nigga involved with Biggie's success. I was the biggest help. I was the truest nigga. I don't write his rhymes, but he know how much he borrowed from me. He know how I used to stop my shows and let him touch the show. Let him blow up and do his whole show in the middle of my show. How I used to buy him shit and give him shit and never ask for it back. How I used to share. How I used to share my experiences in the game and my lessons and my rules and my knowledge on the game with him. You know what I mean? He owed me more. He owed me more than to turn his head and act like he didn't know niggas was about to blow my fucking head off. He knew. But for me to know, like, 3 weeks ago this happened, and then 3 weeks later your album's coming out and you are fucking done in your album.
But you don't know who shot me in your fucking hometown? This nigga's from your neighborhood, and I gotta find out by myself, and I don't even call myself a dime, just a capo. From the west side, and I'm on the east side in jail, and I know who touched me, and I know everything that happened.
Tupac was wrong in blaming whoever the individual figures were who actually had something to do with it in New York and making it into this whole New York City thing and then this East Coast, West Coast thing. And I think that he definitely had someone in his ear, probably Suge, exacerbating it. It sells records. It continues to get media attention, which sells more records.
Tupac had claimed to have gone out with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. This was a great humiliation, reportedly, for Biggie. It was all over.
We were in Manhattan shooting a video. Biggie Smalls had gotten on the radio station, and Biggie said that I cannot believe that New York is allowing Tupac and the Dog Pound to shoot a video in our city right in the heart of Times Square. The words out of Biggie's mouth was Tupac and the Dog Pound. And it wasn't. It was Snoop and the Dog Pound. Tupac was not with us. Snoop at the time was having his hair braided, and all of the artists was in the trailer. And then all of a sudden, gunfire. Someone shot into the trailer. They weren't shooting in there to say, get out. They were shooting in there to kill someone.
There was a shift in Tupac Shakur's lyrical content. He at first was more political, then at some point he became more street. It was West Coast versus East Coast.
The person at Rikers Island was very reflective and he's gonna change his life and everything. This new person was like, fuck New York, fuck the East Coast. Sugar's the man, he takes care of me, he's flashing money in front of the MTV cameras. It was like, wow, it was Jekyll and Hyde.
One of the songs was a song called Hit 'Em Up. It talked about killing the bad boy camp, different artists. It was a lot of threats. I go, Pac. I go, did you hear what you said? He was like, yeah, nigga, I wrote it. Okay, we're gonna need some more security and you need to start wearing a vest.
Anytime you have this synergy between two or more people and they make things happen, when you start breaking that up, things are never the same again.
When you think about Dr. Dre, here's a cat who's always had some sort of big brother or father figure around him. Early on, it was Alonzo Williams. Then it was Eazy-E, Jerry Heller. Then it becomes Suge Knight. And so Dre was one of those cats who always needed guidance from someone else because Dre is really an artistic person. He's an artist. He's a true artist.
Seemed like after a while, somebody was pulling his strings. Like Dre had to answer to somebody.
Who do you think that was?
We all know who that was.
The king, i.e. Suge Knight, felt the need to have the court around him, and I don't think Dre felt comfortable with that.
I've got all these people around me. How many of them do I really need?
Tupac and Dr. Dre was fine in the beginning. Everything was great. I mean, you didn't see any problems. From the time that I worked there in 95 up until early 96, Dr. Dre had been in the studio twice. Pac took offense to that.
He wasn't producing shit. Other niggas was producing the beats, like on my album. Other niggas was doing the beats, and Dre was getting the credit.
Das and all the other little producers and Assassin, all the ones we have, and they did the tracks. Dre wasn't doing the tracks, and Dre didn't write the lyrics.
Suge basically took on the role for Tupac that he had taken on for Dre, and I don't think it's a coincidence that at a certain point, Tupac started becoming the mouthpiece for Suge and started dissing Dre.
He is a dope producer, but he ain't worked in years. I'm out here in the streets, whooping niggas' ass, starting wars and shit, putting it down, dropping albums, doing my shit, and this nigga taking 3 years to do one song.
I seen the change, like, right after we finished Murder Was the Case and we moved into Can-Am Studios and started working on the Dog Food album. I just seen that he wasn't as inspired, and it was like, it was too many thugs and niggas up there that didn't have nothing to do with nothing.
It was mostly just the way the studio was, and that's where I have to spend most of my time.
It was not a work atmosphere anymore. It became fun and games, and the success that kicked in, and we were stars, and motherfuckers just loved being around us and bringing bullshit around us, and Dre wasn't for that.
I just didn't like some of the things that were going on. There was nothing being done to stop it.
Dre likes to work in an environment where he can create, and everybody's on a creative atmosphere, and it's not about what's going on in the hood, how many niggas you shot and how much shit you done did. He don't want that.
Suge took over the company. It was no mystery to nobody. I don't think Dre wanted to be a yes man for somebody, so he wanted his own situation again. So he bailed out.
He says, wait, I want out of this world. I want to form Aftermath, where I'm not part of death row anymore. I want to be beyond that. I want to be with my family. I want to live.
When Dr. Dre left Death Row Records, that was the biggest shock to me, because I was real confused at how you start a label and you leave the label. I always figured if you had a problem with somebody on your label, you make them leave the label and you go on with what you're doing. I guess that was the way of learning that it wasn't all his label.
Dre's departure wasn't a loss. I mean, if you have a multi-million-dollar company, maybe worth $1 billion or so, and you own it 100% and don't have a partner, and you'd have to give him nothing but his walking papers, that's great.
Dre made Death Row Records, you know what I'm saying? And this is absurd that he's gone from one situation to another situation where he feels like he's being undercompensated.
To give up 50% of your label and move on elsewhere from a dangerous situation, which Death Row Records was becoming, and we now find out that it is, was a smart move for him.
September 7th, we were just leaving a fight. Tupac, Mike Tyson, friends, we're at the fight. And we go backstage to leave the building. Immediately after coming from backstage, one of Suge's homeboys came up and whispered into Tupac's ear. Pac took off running. There was a gentleman standing with a MGM security guard by a pillar as Tupac was approaching him. Now, when I think about it, the guy was standing there waiting, and Pac ran up on him, and the fight broke out. Orlando Anderson and a couple of Suge's homeboys had gotten into a fight at the Lakewood Mall in California back in April of '96 over a death row chain, because there was a bounty on the death row chains. The same person that had gotten into altercation with Orlando Anderson in the mall whispered into Tupac's ear, and it caused this fight. They were beating Orlando Anderson up on the ground. Tupac, Suge, and the rest of the entourage, they're pretty much bragging about what had happened. We get back to the Luxor Hotel. So we go up to Tupac's room, he changed clothes, come back downstairs. We're all just standing around. And all the women are coming out, everybody's ready to go over to 662, the after party. So Tupac turns to me and says, no, don't ride with us. He hands me the keys and says, you go drive the little homies, because we're going to the club, we're gonna be partying, and you're gonna drive us. So I said, okay. Pac and Suge get into the BMW. We get back onto the Las Vegas Strip. Suge's the lead car, I'm the car right behind him, and then there's just cars all behind us. So we turn right off of Las Vegas Boulevard onto Flamingo to go down to 662. As we approach the next stoplight, which is Koval in Flamingo, there is a car coming down the open lane that is next to myself and the BMW. As the car is approaching, I turn and I look to my right, and I see the car, and it's a white Cadillac. It kind of had moved over, and I would say closer to the BMW, probably about that close. And an arm just comes out and just starts firing.
Heard the shots being fired. Pac stood up to try to get in the back seat to get out the way of the shots. That's how he got shot in his hip, which hit one of the bones and traveled to hit his lung. I grabbed him and said, get down, and covered him. When I pulled him down, that's when I got shot in my head. So you hit? He said, I'm hit. So I'm driving like a madman to a hospital. And the first thing he said, laughingly, jokingly, loudly, is, I need the hospital? You the one shot in the head.
Coming up next on the 10 o'clock news, his lyrics, his life reflected a gangster lifestyle. Tonight, Bay Area rapper Tupac Shakur is dead of gunshot wounds.
It's been all over the media
all over the news, all over the radio.
Hundreds lined the streets outside a Nation of Islam school to pay their respects to the slain rapper.
The first things I started hearing were rumors that Suge had Tupac shot because Tupac was thinking of leaving the industry. And I started to laugh when I heard that. I said, you know, the problem with this is why would someone like Suge have the shooter shoot across the car so that the bullets would hit him?
There are so many different layers to the story, and it's so tragic. Tupac Shakur is one of those kids who was really one of the great creative forces of our ages. He wasn't just a rapper, he was a kid who was really insightful.
He has said, I didn't want to go to Vegas anyway. He goes, I almost didn't even come. That day was going to happen. It was the destiny of his life. He had the thought of not going, but he went because his destiny was to die that next day.
And it's just a shame that another brother gets lost as a victim of this music.
If you had any street sense knowledge about yourself, you knew that company was gonna come crashing down, feds first.
People let the fame go to their heads and the egos took over, and the next thing you know, it wasn't nowhere to go but down.
Coming up, will the founder of one of rap music's most successful record labels be doing time for a probation violation?
Last year, he pled no contest to 2 counts of assault, stemming from a 1992 attack on 2 aspiring rappers in a Hollywood recording studio. And this is a man who has 8 different convictions.
And Your Honor, I ask you, how many bites at the probation apple does this defendant get? I think it is very clear that Mr. Knight delivers a kick with his right foot.
That man made a choice to ignore his conscience. And it's only him that can reconcile that and can change it. We can't. We can just move on, give our contribution to the music industry, and hope that nothing like this ever happens again.
He was an active participant in this assault, and I do find a violation of probation. I also keep in mind, I think the way he left the scene evidenced a consciousness of guilt. I think he had been involved in an assault, and the way he left the scene causes me to believe that he knew exactly what it was he was doing, what he had been involved in. Your prior record indicates one of violence. You are a danger to the community. Your prior performance on probation was not satisfactory. You committed other crimes while you were on probation. You're not a suitable candidate for probation, in other words, and so therefore probation is denied.
I don't think anybody here has any question that if we were dealing with somebody other than Mr. Knight, what we saw in that videotape, first of all, would not be sufficient to constitute a probation violation, and secondly, and most importantly, even if somebody thought it was, it's certainly not the kind of violation or the kind of activity that warrants a 9-year sentence.
How can Suge be in jail? How can one of the most powerful people in the record business, not black people, one of the most powerful people in the record business, be in jail for something as silly as stopping a fight or even kicking somebody?
In my opinion, this is a miscarriage of justice.
You got this lawyer, this attorney, this guy who is pretty brilliant. So you know that this isn't a regular attorney. He's got some pull somewhere because he's got somebody from the DA's office involved in this thing. And you're saying to yourself, if all these people are involved, all these powerful people, what kind of situation did he set Suge up in? I mean, Dave Kenner was a big man in our business on all levels. And you have to ask yourself, did the money get to him? Did the power get to him? You got to ask yourself, is Suge thinking about this? Is he sitting in jail saying, is this guy really on my side?
Suge Knight was and is death row. And for me, without Suge Knight, there is no death row.
If Suge has grasped all that has happened to him, I think he could come out and again start up Death Row Records and start a record company that would be more viable than ever.
There will be legends no matter what happens, but if they continue to go on, no telling what kind of influence they may have had on the inner city youth in America. When you have guys that have the ears of not only black America, but white America also, you can call some shots. Anybody can sell 4 million records, 5 million records. Anybody can sell out concerts around the world. Whatever they put their name and faces on will sell. Whatever they endorse will be backed up 100%.
The Death Row Records story told the tale of three major record labels, almost brought one of them down, rattled another to its core, and set the framework for a whole new way of doing business in the music business. This was a story that wasn't just about a bunch of guys from Compton. It was a story that affected the whole music business and ultimately the business world.
It's about empowerment. It's about greed. It's about ego. It's about sex. It's about violence. It's about fame. It's about failure. I mean, you don't get any more American than that.
The legacy that Death Row Records has left is both positive and negative. I think the positive legacy is that if you have talent and if you're prepared to work, you can create a business and it can be successful. People always say, you remember how Suge started his company from nothing? We can do that. We're gonna hear this music forever. It's gonna forever mark an era in American culture and American history.
Now the sad part about this whole thing is that Jimmy Iovine and Ted Fields sold Interscope for $400 million. I still have the article. In the Wall Street Journal, it says, Warner's ups its stake in rap music. So what they were buying was Death Row. They paid $400 million for it. So Jimmy Iovine and Ted Fields got $400 million. Tupac's dead and Suge's in jail.
Who's in jail? Mike Harris, Suge Knight. And where's the money? Who controls the money? What happens to the power that all these black folks control?
Death Row is the named party in scores of lawsuits over its financial management and mismanagement. With the federal investigation, they're looking into Suge's dealings in Las Vegas. They're looking into his dealings with Michael Harris.
At no point in time was my money considered illegal. There was no evidence to prove that I ever participated in money laundering.
Michael has an attempted murder charge over his head and a drug case over his head. If the government offered Michael an opportunity to get out of jail to testify against David Kenner or Suge Knight or Andre Young or someone else, there's a good chance that Michael could take it.
I don't work for the government. I only work for myself and my family and my friends. I would stay in prison before I would live as a rat in society.
Suge, I would imagine, in the minds of white corporate America record business, had to be stopped. He had to be stopped.
When we start taking the money that we make in the streets, however we do it, if it's hustling bottles, selling bottle tops, selling a bag of weed on the corner, however we do it, when we do it and we start realizing, you know what, let me find something legal to do, that's when it becomes a problem. They don't want us legal. They rather we, because they feel like if you selling dope, you ain't gonna never really get rich unless you the man sitting next to the goddamn man. It'll be hard to dig up and find who started what with what kind of legal money, but they wouldn't want to do that. If they were to take Death Row right now for Suge Knight, what about Atlantic Group? What about Interscope Records? They made more money than Death Row did off of Death Row. If Death Row was founded by drug money and Death Row made money, and Interscope made money, Atlantic Group made money, you take everybody record company. You don't take just the black man's.